linked hot potato. I love it.
All right, we are now.
I just want to let you know I'm on. I was muted. I didn't realize it.
No, we see you.
But I'm here.
We see you. We are going to go ahead and get started now that we have a quorum, or we had a quorum. Yep, we still have a quorum. So good evening, all, and thank you for joining again for round 2 of moving this work forward. Just in way of quick recap, before we do a quick recap, if we can do some quick introductions, because there are some on the line that weren't able to join us for our first call, but by way of just confirmation, everyone has had their, or has taken their oaths, so we are all on the same page and able to move the work forward. So those that are on the line so far, if we can do a quick round of introductions, name, what brings you to the table, and we can leave it there. So again, I'm Melinda Johnson, serving as co-chair for the committee. And what brings me to the table is a passion to see the system advance forward and be shaped differently for different outcomes, honestly, and to see the betterment of the individuals that are returning to our communities. And I will pass it to co-chair Dooley.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So yeah, I'm Tig Dooley, the other co-chair. Similar things drawing me to the table, and I'm very excited about tonight's meeting to hopefully make further progress getting our ombuds position filled, which I think is one of our key responsibilities. And I think we have a lot of work to do until that happens, and maybe after that we get to share some of the work with a real professional. So I'm hopeful we can make some progress tonight. And I'll pass it along to Kaisha.
Yes, hi, I'm Kaisha Velasquez. I'm a licensed therapist, and I am at the table to be a voice for those who are not at this table and for the mental health field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kaisha. Rena?
Hi, I'm Rena Kapoor. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm here because I've spent my whole career working with people who have mental illness, who are involved with the criminal legal system, and I'm here hopefully to make a difference for people incarcerated in Connecticut.
Thank you, Rena. John?
Hi, everyone. John Spoli. I'm here at the table in hopes to keep a nice balance to things and try and make prison equally great for those working there and those incarcerated, and get everybody where they need to be.
Thank you, John. Daryl?
Hello, everyone. Daryl McGraw, formerly incarcerated person. What brings me to this work is because I'm a formerly incarcerated person, I know how the system can be, and I have hope that the system can change, and I'm hoping that we are part of that change tonight. So happy to be at the table.
Thank you, Melvin.
Hey folks, Melvin Medina. What brings me here today is just trying to build a bit more dignity and compassion for folks in Connecticut's prisons, because they're human beings and deserve kind compassion and love. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Melvin. Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Gearing. I'm an attorney with the Federal Public Defender Office, and I think Mel said it best. So I'm gonna endorse his remarks. I'm here to help people in the community view people experiencing incarceration as human beings who are equally deserving of the rights and privileges of citizenship.
Thank you, Andrew. And we are appreciative to our liaisons, Kirsten and Amina, who are also on the line. And there is an additional Tig Dooley and an additional John Sapoli. And let me explain a little bit of what happened here. So we attempted this time to run our session on a webinar format. So committee members, when you receive a link from Kirsten, that is your link. So your name will pop up when that link is used. But if you share that link for someone, they end up in as you. So members of the general public, On the agenda, there's a registration link, and that a link in agenda is on our website. And when you click that link, it'll let you in. It'll be approved by Kirsten, and it'll let you in as an attendee. And that was just for the sake of being able to modulate the conversation and be able to record who additionally is attending these meetings. So in the future notice, that is how we would like to move forward. So if you are not Tig Dooley, but you are listed as such, please change your name just so we can identify you. And if you are not John Sapoli, please change your name so we can identify you. Good evening, Dr. Howell. If you can share your who you are and what brings you to the table.
I'm Benjamin Howell. I'm an internist. I'm part of the oversight committee. Sorry for being late. I did have some trouble with the links, but I made it.
Awesome. Glad you made it. All right. So just to do a quick recap, and then I will be leaving this in the hands of Chair Tig to carry us the rest of the way. Meeting recap. So last time we did our introductions, everyone has taken their oath or took their oath between last meeting and now, and those recordings have been submitted to Amina. The subcommittee established a working group to work on the ombudsman job description, and that's what we're going to put a lot of our focus on today. And we received some feedback from the general public that I want to make sure we note, and that was using person-centered language when referring to incarcerated individuals. So I know there is different terminologies based on the field that you are coming from, but we are encouraged to use person-centered language. So instead of inmate, incarcerated individuals, justice impacted people, any of those kind of person-centered sayings would be greatly appreciated. So with that said, let us move straight into the Ombuds job description draft, which all committee members should have received ahead of time. I know it might seem tedious, Tig, but unless you totally object, I would love to read this out section by section and stop, have discussion and move on. And if there's no discussion, cool, but at least we know we've done a thorough job of reviewing this together.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll just say a couple of words to sort of introduce it. And then I don't know, Melinda, if you're able to screen share or if everybody has the description that I sent around open, but maybe that would help us as we go through it sort of paragraph by paragraph. But just at the outset, this was the product of work first by Mel, who's on the line, who did a yeoman's job of sort of assembling all of the statutory and sort of expected responsibilities of this position and outline them and sort of categorize them in a matrix or flow chart that I also passed around. And we also looked at model legislation from Families Against Mandatory Minimums, which has a model statute creating an ombuds position, and sort of began with a really broad job description and spent some time trying to streamline it and winnow it down, both, so it can fit into a newspaper page if we put it there, and so that it doesn't scare anybody away who might turn out to be a great applicant. Our guiding principle, I think, and Mel can jump in too if he has anything additional to say or contradict, was that we want to attract as many quality candidates as possible. We do want to sort of convey that it's a big job. It's the head of a state office. There's going to be a lot of responsibility. We need very serious candidates for this, but we didn't want to include any sort of artificial requirements or prerequisites that might leave anybody out. So I think that means. Hopefully it means there's going to be a fair amount of work for us as a committee, reviewing applications and interviewing people. But we think that for this first, the inaugural position, we want to cast a broad net and really select the best person that we can. There's only a few constraints within the statute, and even those we didn't really, I don't think we highlighted in the job description. But the only statutory requirement really is that the person has to be resident in Connecticut when they interview with us. It's kind of strangely worded, so that's why we left it out, because we feel like if somebody applied from out of state and was willing to move here, we could probably work around or, have that person establish residence before an interview. Otherwise, it's up to us. And like I said, I feel like we should, I might just be speaking for myself, but I think we should show that it's an important job with a lot of responsibilities without kind of overwhelming people. Mel, anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean,
Really-
I think the only thing. Oh, go
Sorry, Mel,
ahead.
really quick before you jump in, just so I could get this working while you're talking. Kirsten, if I can have a share screen permission, please. Go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is, I mean, pending a budget and funding from the legislature, I think it's probably best to approach this hire as one of a few that'll be in this office. And so I think what I would push the rest of this commission to think about is we're probably looking for someone that can be a leader and can manage people and has experience at that high level, because they're going to be building out an office from scratch. And so we've already had some internal conversations about the importance of both lived experience, the importance of experience within the system, the wanting folks that have a strong advocacy background, wanting people with strong investigation skills. And I think all of that is necessary and important. But probably when we're approaching the job for the ombudsman themselves, we're looking for someone that can manage an office and can recruit those skills that we need the office to have, in addition to being excellent at the job. So it is a high bar, but I totally agree that the goal here is to cast as wide a net as possible.
Great. Yeah. So we can go through, like Melinda suggested, sort of paragraph by paragraph. The one thing I want to especially focus on once we get down there is the timing and the sort of application process. That's something that I think we should discuss as a group and decide how we're going to move forward. But we basically start with the description. So these first two paragraphs describe the position. This is essentially taken out of the statute. So it gets to what I think is the bottom line, is that this person is meant to take all possible actions, including education, advocacy, lobbying, and litigation when necessary to advance the interests of those in custody. And then in the second paragraph, we say how we're seeking these candidates, and then later on it'll describe how we plan to sort of review and on what timeline. So anything before, then there's the duties and responsibilities, but anything about the initial description of the job that sticks out to anybody, or anybody objects to or wants to add to?
So I know for me, one of the first things that stuck out was just knowing the nature of the business. When I saw lobbying, I thought to myself, well, do they have to be a lobbyist? If I'm the only one that thought that, then fine. But if I'm not the only one that thought that, I think perhaps adding like a little clause that says does not need to be a lobbyist, a registered lobbyist. And Ty, you could see everybody. I can't see anybody anymore.
Oh, okay. I don't know if there's anybody else have that sort of question pop up. I think, this is a quote from the statute, so we could just kind of eliminate the quotation marks and remove some of it, or put it in our own words. But yeah, we certainly, like I said, we don't want to give the impression that you have to be a lobbyist, or that you have to be an attorney, that you have to be any number of prerequisites, because we're deliberately not including those prerequisites in the description that follows.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Melinda. This is Kaisha. Maybe we somehow put something in quotations or remove it.
Okay. And just so I think what we'll probably do is go through it like this. I'm making some notes, and then I think we could maybe vote at the end that whether we would adopt this subject to those revisions, and then that way we wouldn't have to get back together to vote separately. Does that make sense, Melinda, or do you think we would have to?
No, that sounds
Yeah,
good.
okay. So I'm taking some notes of these, and unless there's, we can discuss any of them, but if there's no debate, I'll just assume that I will make these changes. So for example, I'll eliminate.
Good
Sorry,
evening, Scott.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It's Scott. I'm up near Boston and business, so I'm trying to pay attention here.
nice to see you. So yeah, we're going through the job description paragraph by paragraph. Folks are weighing in. So the first comments is we'll probably remove these quotations to eliminate the impression that one would have to be a lobbyist or frankly a lawyer, right? Because it also says initiating litigation. So both of those, even though they're from the statute, are probably not necessary in this introduction to the description. Any other comments on those first two paragraphs from anybody?
I don't know where we're planning to post these advertisements, but will it be obvious to people that we're talking about the Connecticut Department of Correction, or should we specify that?
Certainly doesn't hurt to specify that, yeah. Like I said at the beginning, I'm sure we'll be saturating Connecticut job boards and whatnot, but we don't want to limit it to Connecticut. We may have to based on the statutory language. So yeah, I think we would plan to put it on, you know, some sort of national search boards, and so we should certainly make clear what state we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands or anything up, Melinda. So if you want to, maybe we can go down to the duties and responsibilities. And these were, if you saw the matrix that Mel created, you know, there's sort of categories, and we basically, for the purposes of the description, you know, separated the duties into like administration. I think there's examinations, which is sort of the visits of facilities and sort of oversight of specific facilities. And then there's investigations, community outreach, I believe. I don't have them memorized, so we'll have to go back to the job description. But yeah, this is all from the statute, right, Mel? So this is what we would be if people are reaching out to you to discuss the position. It's good to know all of these requirements, but again, we don't think we need to have like a separate bullet point for all of these in the description. So I think we can go back to, sorry to make you do all the shifting around, Melinda. But, all right, so first we make clear at the outset, this first paragraph is that they're expected to perform all Ombud services, and that citation actually takes you to the statute where there really is a list, right? And so anybody can review the statute and see what they are statutorily required to do, and then we just try to kind of categorize it and put it in layman's terms here. So the first category is the administration. We think this is important for the reasons Mel was just discussing, that, you know, at least for this first person, needs to figure out how to start an office, how to hire. And there's a requirement of an associate ombuds, and obviously I think we anticipate there would be additional staff members as well. So the person has to create a budget and recruit and hire staff and sort of do the general work of overseeing an office. I think that one, there could be many more bullets there, but again, we tried to keep it to sort of the high level ones, just to give the sense of what would be required administratively. So I'll just pause and see if there's questions or additions that people think are required there. And if you, yeah, please speak up, because I also can't see everybody at once. So if you do, just go ahead and unmute and speak up if you have a question or comment, anything. But hearing none, immediately we can move to the engagement with the Correction Advisory Committee and other state offices. Obviously, that's us. So, you know, these are just the responsibilities of interacting with us, keeping us informed. There's a specific statutory requirement of report. I think it's quarterly reports to our committee and annual reports to the Judiciary Committee. And I think there's 4 here. There might be another on the next page, but let's see. All right, no, that's it for that one. So any other additions for that category? Okay. This is great. If we can move along, that's good for everybody. Examinations is the category of kind of visiting facilities. We did consider whether to mention like scoring, rating facilities, and sort of determine that might be within the discretion of whoever takes this office, as it's not a specific statutory requirement, and we don't want to necessarily bind anyone. But there is the idea that you would have a sort of obligation to continuously monitor and examine facilities, including scheduled and unscheduled visits, and then review and evaluate regulations and policies, and importantly, establish a reporting system. That last bullet as well is it's sort of modeled after the model legislation that I included in the email. That one has specific categories of data that are required to be collected. We don't have that statutory requirement in Connecticut. So again, we just felt, let's sort of describe that generally and not actually say what needs to be collected. But we do think it's important that this person establish a reporting system for the purposes of monitoring sort of significant events at facilities. All right. Go ahead.
Tag, this is Ben. Just to be, because I feel like that's the theme throughout this, is that we're trying to keep this general, because like we're not saying you will do yearly sort of scheduled visits. Is that, I mean, because that's not in the statute, right?
That's right. Yeah. So our sort of guiding principle was that if it's in the statute and that therefore, required by law, we would mention it. If not, we tried to leave it sort of as a general notion of a requirement and not bind the person to thinking, oh, I have to do this X number of times, that Y number of times. And again, like I said at the beginning, we think a lot of work will have to go into discussing our expectations with this person or, all the candidates. But we just want to make sure we get a lot of candidates first and cast that broad net. And then, I think that's a continuing role for us, is to say, we expect this type of engagement with our committee, we expect you to be doing this and that. But I think unless it's a sort of statutory requirement, we've tried to keep it general in the description.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, so investigations, this is one we discussed as well, because we think what's most important for the ombuds is sort of investigating systemic type issues that come up in complaints. Again, we don't anticipate, and we can discuss this as a group, we don't necessarily anticipate this person like reinvestigating every grievance, right, that is filed within the prison's administrative remedy system. But we don't necessarily want to say you don't do that either. So we've focused here on developing procedures for investigating and hearing sort of systemic complaints, but we don't necessarily limit it to that. And again, I think, we're looking for a creative person who can sort of define his or her own role. So we just want to make sure that they recognize this is a big part of the job, but we don't necessarily specify what any boundaries for those investigations. All right. So education and advocacy, this is, there is a requirement of that there be a website. So, we included that. And obviously it's a very useful way to keep the public educated. This is the part where we think we're not scaring anybody away, and that this is what anybody who would be interested in this job would be eager to do, keep abreast of best practices and try to bring them to Connecticut, basically. And, there's again, lobbying is mentioned here, so we could probably use a different word if that signifies a certain licensure to some people. But basically the idea here is just, be an advocate and inform the public and inform the legislature as necessary.
I might offer, as an alternative to lobbying, describing advocacy in two different ways. So community advocacy and legislative advocacy.
That would work, yeah.
Yeah, I like that because I like the maintaining the legislative advocacy as part of the role, but I do agree that lobby entails like a certain set of activities that I don't think we want to constrain.
Yeah, and I don't think that was intended at all. So it's a good catch from folks who recognize that as a certain connotation. Legislative advocacy. Okay, and then constituent and stakeholder engagement. We want to make clear that a real function of this job is to be, an advocate specifically for incarcerated people and their families. There's a recognition that this is going to be, it's an independent role. They're meant to sort of put the interests of incarcerated people and impacted people first. So we include this as, essentially a requirement of the job, these separate responsibilities, although again, they're sort of generally described, and we're not trying to define them precisely for whoever takes this role. Okay, so those are the categories and bullets. Again, I've said it many times, the sort of guiding principle we were following, but if there are specific things you think might have been left out, I imagine if there were things you thought shouldn't be included, you would have spoken up, but maybe if there's other really essential job responsibilities that you think should be included here, let us know. Okay, so experience and qualifications, like I said at the outset, we think it's going to be a demanding job. We think, if we're lucky, we're going to have a very impressive person fill it, but we really don't want to put any constraints on who we'd consider for the job. So, we kind of require a bachelor's degree or 5 years experience. So even a bachelor's degree is not required. Certainly no advanced degree is not required, although we do think, realistically, there would be a preference for advanced degrees in certain fields, relating to civil rights or criminal justice. But what we're really trying to emphasize is it's somebody who's going to be ready to create and lead a statewide office with an important mandate. But here, please take as much time as you need to look at these, because I think it's something that we even discussed in the last meeting, how to kind of frame the qualifications for the job. And so we're open to hearing other people's views.
This is Ben again. I am struggling with that bullet. What's implied by the bachelor's degree or 5 years professional experience in the fields of civil rights and or criminal justice is required. I just don't know exactly what that looks like. The 5 years of experience. And
I think it's pretty flexible. We were kind of joking about this, that you sort of we're trying to eliminate a lot of people who approach a job description kind of say, well, I think I can fudge that one, and I think it's that's true. And I think what we're trying to do is say, like, encouraging it, saying like, there's a specific number of years experience, which I think is not unreasonable. I don't think it's really a job where someone fresh out of college, no matter how enthusiastic they are, is going to be the best candidate for. But we certainly we're open to hearing if folks want to eliminate the requirement at all. But I think really we're just trying to establish that you need to be ready to lead, which frankly, if anything, I would say maybe the 5 years experience should be required, whether or not the bachelor's degree is required. We kind of frame them as alternatives. I see, Melinda, there's Daryl and John have hands raised. I'm not sure if there are others. But Daryl, you want to speak up?
So I'm looking at the criminal justice piece, and I'm also looking at the experience with investigations. And for me, that it almost speaks to law enforcement more so than somebody like myself. If I'm looking at this, I might not be qualified because I haven't done any investigations per se. Maybe some fact gathering. I probably could fudge that if with a good sentence or two. I struggle with the criminal. I would prefer, this is me, prefer that it say criminal justice reform or some type of advocate or advocacy piece versus just criminal justice. Leaving it at criminal justice that opens the door for more of a person with a law enforcement background than maybe somebody who's been fighting for criminal justice reform or shout out to Barbara Fair for transformation, as I'm starting to use that more and more. So I think that we should be looking at that. That should be in the job description more so just leaving it at criminal justice, because this is a reform measure we want to be correcting. So I just want to put that out there. And the language where it starts to talk about investigation or fact gathering, kudos to you guys for writing this. But I'm just wondering if we can change that language up a little bit, because it definitely speaks to, in my background, it speaks to like people with law enforcement background. To me, the language speaks like that, as if it's calling for someone with that type of background.
So before we move to other comments, can we bring some resolution or recommendations to the table for those two areas? Thank you, Daryl, for raising it. You don't have to be the only one to come up with recommendations. I just don't want to leave the thought unfinished before moving on.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. I have a different reaction to criminal justice, right? To me, it kind of sounds like defense lawyer type thing, but I think it's, that's totally valid. I don't think that we're excluding people with a law enforcement background, but you're absolutely right. I don't even think we're necessarily targeting that. My view is we want to have as few sort of artificial limitations as possible. I think realistically, a good candidate for the job would have an investigations background broadly construed, would have an interest in civil rights and criminal justice broadly construed, meaning including the sort of defendant's side of that, for example. But I don't want to use any words that turn people away. So I just think that the fewer requirements we have, or the broader we state them, it basically just means more work for us, but that's our job, so we don't necessarily have to send messages that might deter folks, rather than, again, cast the broadest net and then winnow it down. Mel or Scott, you have any reactions to that?
Yeah, I was just going to offer, I think what may be helpful is if we add additional fields that I think are relevant and probably within the scope of people that we want interested in this, which would be the field of public health and social work, right? Like, I think that softens.
That's true.
To Daryl's point, like what the scope of the type of person we're looking for. Those fields have their own versions of investigations, which may or may not fit within the kind of concept of what an ombudsman was historically understood as from the legal profession. But right, I mean, we can't forget that DOC is one of the largest health providers in the state, just based on the population of incarcerated people. So having someone with a public health background, for example, could be incredibly beneficial as an ombudsman who would bring that public health lens to prison conditions, for example. So I hear Daryl and think there's ways we can soften that.
Well, what do you think about that, Daryl? I think that's a really good suggestion. I don't know if it goes all the way for you, Daryl, or would you still want to eliminate, the kind of like investigations and criminal justice?
I'm open to I'm open to the investigation thing. Just really doesn't sit well with me. I like research. I like the term research. Investigation just doesn't, But I mean,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go. I was just saying
the only thing I'd say about that is it really is like a critical part of the job, right? Investigating conditions. So I'm wondering if it's just the word, if there's something else a different word we can use to get to the same point across, because I do think that experience in investigations broadly understood is fairly important, because that's going to be.
And I'm not arguing that. I definitely want somebody to do that. I would want them to be thorough at that too. So I'm not I just don't want people. I just don't want us to set ourselves up, or I don't want to be a part of something that only brings a certain kind of candidate to the thing. As you know, I'm going to be vocal about that from start to finish. of the type of candidates that I think, you know, like I said, always a formerly incarcerated person. And if I was reading that as a formerly incarcerated person that is successfully transitioned back into the community, that certain words in there, there are certain buzzwords in there that would make me not want to, I would think that I wasn't qualified for that position. So I just thinking that as we're going through it, you know, just thinking of maybe adding words to or whatever. I like the conflict resolution piece. I think maybe that would be something that if I saw it, maybe I could overlook the investigation piece and be like, I've been part of conflict resolution.
So maybe even the word ordering. Looking at some of these synonyms that are offered up, I think investigations, would we be willing to look at a combination or another phrasing like examining systems? Someone with experience in conflict resolution, fact gathering, investigation, and or examining systems.
I could work with that.
Does that sound like, okay, so that reorders things a little bit?
Yeah.
It's investigation and or.
Yeah, I kind of think the more words, the better, right? To get, you know, if someone's got
And-
experience in investigations, we want to hear from you. If you don't, but you have experience in conflict resolution, we want to hear from you, you know?
Yeah, and just to be clear on where we landed under the bachelor's degree, it seems like a bachelor's degree at least 5 years professional experience in the fields of civil rights, criminal justice reform, public health, or social work.
Can I also jump in here?
Yes.
So going back to what Daryl said, I agree with what he was saying. I can't see where the confusion would be there, where it might make some people feel uneasy. I went and looked back at a couple of job postings for the state of Connecticut, and when they leave it broad, for example, it says examples of a related degree: criminology, human services, justice, and law administration. So I think throwing in some different degrees like that, whether it be criminology or human services, it might broaden the spectrum, so it doesn't just seem like solely law enforcement. So I could see how it paints that picture reading those different bulletins. And I also was looking up synonyms for investigation, and exploration came up, which I think would go hand in hand with fact finding. And then, you know, the whole thing so far, I think you guys nailed it with being broad. It definitely opens the doors for a lot of possibilities. And you know, at the end of the day, we're all going to have our own expectations when it comes time to narrow it down. That's when we could get a little tighter with it. But I think this right now is pretty spot on.
Yeah, great. So, John, sorry, you said criminology, human services, and I think you mentioned one or two other degrees programs.
So it's criminology, human services, justice, and law administration. That was just a job posting for my job.
I see.
So those the degrees that they threw in there.
Well, I kind of think the more, you know, I agree with broadening it, and definitely public health and social work really are right within the bailiwick here. I think Ben might have had.
Yeah, no, it was Ben. I don't know where we landed with the investigation term. I do want to be cognizant that like there is going to be a component where it's like an individual complaint that you are, you know, going out sort of like looking into more closely, whereas like a research or an evaluation or examination feels more broad, which is important too. But like I just want to, like, as much as I hear Daryl about the valence to investigation, there is a component about like a complaint driven component to the job that's I think important. And that's all I'm responding to.
Yeah, so where we landed is we're not dropping investigation, just shifting it later so it doesn't offset people.
Perfect.
So experience and fact gathering and or conflict resolution, investigation and or examining systems.
Yeah, and then the investigation component so higher up is so prominent. I think it's going to be.
Yeah, and a lot of it again is in reviewing application packages. We're obviously going to have our own focuses, right? And I do think if someone's got experience in and investigations and internal investigations or whatever it is, that's going to be a good qualification, but we don't want to suggest that it's required, especially if it's going to turn folks away who don't think that they have that experience, and we might we might disagree with them. I see Daryl and John again.
So real quick, I don't even know if it was mentioned or gone over yet. Do we know what the salary is looking like for this position? I feel like that might also determine what kind of degrees we're looking at, whether it's going to be a master's or whatever. I feel like higher degree, higher salary cap.
Yeah, so we don't have a salary, and we have requested more information about the actual budget appropriation. And so we sort of have a placeholder in there right now, which is the next section down. And we can discuss that again in a minute. But what we tried to do is make clear that it's going to be comparable to these other positions. If you look those positions up, it's 140,000, 150. It's definitely a good. It's a high-paying job. It should be expected to be. But we can't say what it is yet until we know. So we've left it there.
Tig, do you think there's a comfortable range that we could post though?
Well, I think we could. I guess so. It sort of depends. We know that the initial appropriation is, I think, $667,000 or $670,000, something like that. And so it does. I feel like we can be comfortable that it's at least it's a six-figure salary. It's somewhere we could choose a range, but that person will also be sort of hiring other staff, with that same appropriation. So I wasn't sure. I'm interested in what folks think if we want to be more specific about it. I do want to somehow convey that it's going to pay really well, and so people should apply. So maybe that is a good suggestion. And I guess I would guess that there is a limit on it. I don't know, the sort of, we'd reached out to the Office of Administrative Services for more detail, but I imagine there's a cap, right? Under whatever state employment laws. But so I'm almost reluctant to put a range in because I don't know what the top of the range would be.
Can we put a minimum maybe?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know what do folks think. Do you think that's, I guess the question is, would a layperson, read comparable to that of heads of similar offices and not understand that it would be, more than $100,000? You're quite possibly they wouldn't understand that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So I'll make a note of that too.
No, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but is there going to be a probationary period? Like most state employees, it's about 6 months.
Yeah, I think that I think that like once this job description is completed and we send it over to the folks responsible on the HR side for the state government, because it's a state employee position, that like there's going to be a lot of HR components that are like filled in, including probably compensation. Like there's a grade level for every state employment for all state jobs. So I'm sure like a lot of this will be resolved in the process of turning this into something that's going to get posted somewhere.
So can we, for now, that's a good point, Matt. I mean, can we agree that we want to be as open and precise as possible about the salary? So if we get a range, we'll put the range in. If we get a minimum, we'll put the minimum in. But we can't. That'll be kind of up to a different office or set of revisions from HR folks.
Awesome.
All right, and Daryl's hand is still up. I think you're muted, Daryl, at the moment.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to like when we're looking at candidates, and this is in conversation in reference to, and we are not, by no means am I saying that we are trying to deter people with law enforcement backgrounds. But I do, as a group, want to look at if you're coming at it with that investigation lens from a law enforcement background, then certain things seem to see that lens. And it's been my experience and some of the people that I deal with that have that lens. They come with a certain lens. So I want to make sure that whoever gets this job has their worldview is open, and it's not just like focused on like, from us, because your career, because this is your pathway, then you look at things a certain way, like, so we need to be conscious of that. That's why, for me, investigations, making sure like, who we're targeting and who does come through the door. We want to make sure that this person has a global mindset, because of the fact that this work is, you're not, even though individuals are incarcerated, we want that person that you are working for them. Those are your people. Those are the people that you're working for. So in this role, you may have a DOC badge or career, and you might be, but you are working for those people that are incarcerated. And it's important that the job description speaks to that.
So I personally agree in terms of my evaluation of sort of hypothetical candidates. That's going to be very important to me, and I think a lot of others on the committee, that they have a sort of reform mindset, and that they understand their role as an advocate. Again, I just don't want to deter folks who may actually be great candidates from throwing their hat in the ring. So, for example, we don't have. I've seen proposals that sort of say you can't be a current or former member, Department of Corrections officer or something. There's folks on our committee. Like Scott would be a great person for this job, right? And he'd be excluded that way. So we just don't want to eliminate anybody. But I think, Daryl, a lot of us would agree with you that as we're evaluating, that's something we got to be looking for. And we do sort of hint at it in the last set of bullets. It's not a requirement, but I think that we probably would all agree that it would be a plus for this person to have personal experience within the Department of Corrections, either as a formerly incarcerated person or as a family member. So we did include that as sort of a preference, but not a requirement. I see Mel's also got a hand up here.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, this may be an issue of like just the order is a signal of preference, or where our, what we weigh as heavily. And so like maybe if we just throw constituent and stakeholder engagement up higher or switch the order, that may help convey what we think is like kind of pivotal in the role. But I think the other thing too is that what Daryl's raising is somewhat, and I'm adding to it, but I think is an important conversation for us as a committee to talk about at some point, which is the focus of an ombudsman historically has been the kind of individual complaints or grievances that folks are experiencing. And yet so much of the work of the advocacy community, Barbara included, right, was to change that framing of an ombudsman to be focused on a systems analysis. And so when I'm thinking about systems analysis, what I feel great about that, maybe we need to change some of the wording on the investigation pieces, that really isn't something that someone with a law enforcement background is particularly excels at, right? They would probably excel at the individualized complaint, but not necessarily analyses of systems and failures in systems. That to me lends more towards, and maybe this is also problematic, but right, more to the legal profession than necessarily a law enforcement profession, though I think social work and a public health lens also aids in that direction. So maybe we changed I think what as I was reading, right, this job description, we're trying to do two things at once. There's a constituency, which are incarcerated people and what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis and their complaints. And then there's, right, this external kind of like also need to evaluate the system. And maybe we just mess with the words a little bit to convey more of a systems analysis and investigation. And that may, Daryl, kind of ease your feelings about the more grievance focused or individualized kind of investigation piece.
Couldn't have said it better, brother Mel. I appreciate that.
Right. So that comment is more for the actual, in the job description on the previous page, the investigations category, right, Mel, too.
Yeah.
More precise about it being a sort of systemic issues thing. Yeah. All right. This is the last page, but I don't think we need to go back. I think I have the note I need for that. So can you just go back one page, Melinda? All right. So we, again, if there's further discussion on experience and qualifications, we're happy to have it. I feel like the compensation and benefits thing is sort of a placeholder. I don't know if there's much we can discuss or resolve right now, other than to say we will be as precise about the salary as we can in order to attract more candidates to what should be a good job. And then the application process. This let me just give a little prelude to. What we had in mind is the appropriation for this office is for July, right? The new fiscal year. So it would be ideal to have somebody in place by July. But it's almost April now, and there are some sort of statutory periods built into the process where we select. Just as a reminder, you guys probably know this, but just in case, we review applications, we interview people, and then we're meant to select 3 to 5 finalists or candidates to forward to the governor. Those 3 to 5 have to be put before the public in a hearing as well. So you have to build in time for that hearing. And then the governor has 30 days to make the appointment. So you sort of have to build that 30 days in as well. And if he doesn't select from one of our candidates within that time, then the top one is automatically sent to the assembly. And it could be that, if the assembly is not in session, it'll be an acting ombuds to begin with, which is also what the statute contemplates. But that's mainly with that 30 days and with the public hearing. I'm just trying to explain that it would be we'd have to kind of get moving and condense a lot so that there is actually time. We'd basically have to make our recommendations by the end of May in order to get action from the governor. So we're looking at 2 months, which I've never been through a process like this, so I don't know really if it's that much shorter than the usual. But it strikes me that we'd want to be very vocal about trying to attract candidates during that period, and very swift about reviewing applications as they come in. So the third page.
Did Tig fall out? Did we lose him? And if we did,
Yeah, I think we lost him.
I was gonna say, if we did, Mal, are you prepared to finish?
Yeah. Yep. I'm reading this as much as everyone else. I mean, okay, so the big thing here is we've got to the late May. We need 3 to 5 candidates by late May. I think what we're talking about is finalizing this job description after the revisions have been made. And what I think we need clarity, probably, Melinda, on is the length of time between our finalization and state government's process to get this posted. I just know historically those things aren't always they're not on the fly and super quick. So I think what we probably want to consider is, given the conversation we've had today and and all of the recommendations that have been taken into account, if folks would feel comfortable voting to move forward in light of the changes that have been suggested. The challenge here is that Tad's not on the phone, so that may prove difficult. So maybe what we do statutorily, I think, right, we have to have a quorum to vote, and we can't do. And we do.
And
so
Tig
maybe
is texting that his laptop died. He'll be back on in a minute.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah. Any other lingering questions, though, before we move toward that vote? And again, the vote would be to accept the job description with the necessary or the recommended changes that arose from tonight. Okay. All right, as we wait for Ty, I guess we can open up for brief comments from the public before we move toward a vote. Are there any sayings from the public? Barbara, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm you, Barbara.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I actually was putting my hand up because I didn't know by this being a webinar, is the public have space to ask questions or make comments? So I just wanted
Yes,
to
we
make
were
sure
we
do
were going to
have that.
hold that to the end. but-
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we have that. Okay.
No problem. But before we voted on this item, if there were any other sayings from the public, I did want to make note of it.
I had a couple of concerns myself. One of them was, I know there's many people who can leave without degrees. So I get a little nervous when I see that there's a specific degree that a person has to have. And I think that limits who can apply for this job. And then the other thing is, and I think you have decided that it's going to be a Connecticut resident, because if they're, I think if they're going to be working with Connecticut and with people that live in Connecticut, that they should have some kind, be able to show they have some kind of way to relate to people, the incarcerated people in Connecticut. Because I think one of the ombudsmen that they had in the past was not that kind of a person, and that's why it failed. And incarcerated people are already saying to me, they want to make sure they don't get somebody they got had before because they really didn't represent them. So when I hear Daryl, and I think it was Melvin, talk about they should have more of a mindset of transforming the system, I agree. That's what it should be focused on. Somebody who's about transforming this system, which means it's not going to be looking for people who already work in the system, because the system's not working in that manner. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And just to catch you up to speed, Ty, when you dropped off, we're moving to a vote, but before we did, we were just going to allow a few comments from the general public on the actual job description. And so that's what Barbara was responding to. And just to clarify, Barbara, in response to what you shared, at the beginning of the description, what was made clear is that we would add Connecticut in front of everything, Department of Corrections, because while ideally the candidate would be from Connecticut, there may be individuals living elsewhere that have experience with this system that might come across this posting on some other ground. So we want to make sure that that's there. And then in regards to the degrees necessary, I think we decided to amend the language on the bachelor's degree section to read as a bachelor's degree or at least 5 years professional experience in the fields of civil rights and or criminal justice reform, public health, social work, and human services. So it's a bachelor's degree and or 5 years experience in these broadened categories.
Okay, one more red flag for me where it says they need to have experience in legislative, judicial, or executive branch. A prior experience in those, that's a red flag for me.
Just to
Thank
be
you.
clear, it's that would be a preference, not a requirement, but it may still raise the same flag for you.
Yeah, because when you put a preference, that means that person's going to get an extra point just because they have this over someone else who doesn't have that experience in the government.
Thank you. Katie?
I might have missed it in the beginning, but my understanding would be that a relatively large responsibility and duty of the job would be to hire staff and really build a team, because obviously this is a very big position. And I see that one of the requirements of the job would be previous leadership experience or experience being able to lead teams. I wasn't sure that there was a congruent duty listed about hiring and building teams and making sure that that's something that there actually is written into the job description. I might have just missed it, but I think it just needs to be clear that they have the team building capacity.
Yes. So under administration, it is specifically listed recruitment and hiring of staff. That is built in there. Thank you. Cindy?
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Cindy Frizio. I don't know how to express this, so let me just get it out there. Many of you know that I work with what some people would say, and certainly an underserved population. Other people would say the ugliest baby in the orphanage, working with people on the sex offense registry and their families. And there's a whole bunch of prejudice and ignorance, quite frankly, and contempt prior to investigation about the people I serve. And so that is a concern of mine based on certainly what I know about corrections. And I know how people are treated inside prisons as well as returning citizens. They are not treated the same way. And just like other things, we've got people of color, Black men in particular, represented at 40% or more on our registries and in other places. So it's the same issue. And that's what I'm worried about is the bias. I've had my share of direct communications with corrections, the commissioners, and it takes a lot of courage to understand and sort of dig a little deeper to really get to know what the issues are. We're just people like anybody else. And so I just want to mention that. And I think that is connected with what Daryl was saying, and then Barbara echoed. I mean, and in terms of, I know everybody's got to live and money is important, but I really see this person being driven by other factors than money. And just in my mind, I'm a former headhunter recruiter, and I don't see this person. I think the person should be well compensated, but I think the person's is driven by not money, other things that are otherworldly, I guess. So I guess that's it. I experienced myself a lot of prejudice within other advocates, amplifiers, other organizations. And so I know that the group I represent is treated differently and should not be. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Having heard the remarks of the public, does any member wish to make any other revisions to the draft as it stands, other than the revisions we've already made?
Oh, I have one thing. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Let's get this answered first, Cindy.
It's about that though. Okay.
So I unmuted. I didn't raise my hand. Sorry. You know, I was sitting here thinking, and Cindy kind of sparked something in my mind. You know, when we start to think about the population that's being served, 60, 75% are minorities, right? How are we not, when we're looking at this position, we should be looking at somebody that's familiar with these populations, familiar with urban environments, familiar with poverty, familiar with these, you know, places that people come from. So you need to understand the population. In order for you to serve a population, you should understand it. Mm-hmm. And that's how our system got where we are today, because there are many people that work in high level positions but have no clue about the populations that they're serving. And so, and I also think, you know, thank you, Cindy, I think that, you know, and this is me saying this, is I'm going to say that the person should reflect the population that they're serving. You know, that we should be seriously looking. I'm not excluding anybody, but when you start to talk about someone walking in a position to serve in a role, especially a high level role like this, how do they not reflect the population that they are serving? So I just want us to seriously consider that.
Daryl, thank you for that reflection as led by Cindy's remarks. So, you know, looking at this under the areas of experience and qualifications, there is nothing about cultural competency or any of that kind of language around equity or understanding of, there isn't.
Yeah, I think the only way, sorry to interrupt, in the sort of communication skills, we tried to allude to that, but we could certainly include a more explicit, bullet point, like you said. I don't know how you'd phrase it, but cultural competency, or I'm certainly open to someone dictating how that should sound. But yeah, I agree that it's an important qualification.
Daryl?
I was just gonna say, based on what Tag said, I in good conscience couldn't vote on something if we don't have that in there. So moving forward, and I don't wanna, and unfortunately I'm gonna have to leave shortly, but I just want you to know that that's not something that I could vote on if we didn't have the cultural competency piece in there.
So we're going to offer revised language now, even though you won't be here to vote. I'd like to get that on the books as one of the revisions. And we have thoughtful people on the line that have heard that language before around cultural competency. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but we can offer up something that the second set of eyes that's responsible for putting the details together to this can get in better language for us, but to offer something. Kaisha, I don't want to mispronunciate your name.
Yes, Kaisha. I think it should include that the person should be culturally competent and culturally responsive too, because when they're looking through the lens of investigation or data gathering or fact finding and examination, they have to see it through that lens and respond that way appropriately. Because I'm also thinking about, when you think about individuals incarcerated, a lot of them have mental health issues. And if that plays a factor in the complaint, being able to respond to that too appropriately.
Thank you. What about language around demonstrated cultural responsiveness? Thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yep, making it better. Ben?
I think that's better than cultural competency. Feels not right to me, but cultural responsiveness feels more active.
Okay.
And do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I do want to acknowledge Barbara's comment about, or Ms. Fair's comment about the though not required preference clauses. That I don't know. We might, if we could change the order and put the second one first, the with personal experience, just to really emphasize that would be the thing that we would most strongly prefer. I would like that, because I do worry that the language around having an advanced degree, like a JD or a PhD, I mean, that's what it is in my mind, to be careful about not excluding, having people not apply because they're worried about that.
Okay, so to be clear, where we get down to that section that says, though not required, preference will be given to candidates, and it goes on to a with, Dr. Howell is asking that the second bullet be raised to the first bullet. So it would read with personal experience before with advanced degrees in. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. The prior suggestion on cultural responsiveness, I think that's great. But just to Kaisha's point, does that in everyone's mind encompass also experience and responsiveness towards people with mental health concerns? I mean, yeah, I feel like we might need an additional adjective or something to cover that, which really, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's going to be very useful.
Ty, while we're talking about that, I would say, and I appreciate Kaisha mentioning that, but we should be talking about mental health, trauma, and substance use, and having experience in all those areas. Because we know that 85 to 90% of our people that are incarcerated have, if not all, one or two of those challenges. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that, because that's something that you need to be knowledgeable too. If I'm incarcerated and I have a substance use disorder, and my issue is I'm about to leave this prison system and I haven't been adequately served because of my substance use disorder or my challenges with mental health and or trauma, I feel like, that might be a complaint that I bring to the ombudsman. And if they're not knowledgeable about how important that is, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to make sure I'm speaking to the right people, is the fact that we acknowledge and that person is well-rounded to understand the lack of that service and or treatment will only jeopardize me from returning, possibly create more me recidivating.
Thank you, Daryl. And I see Melvin has his hand raised, but to synopsize what you recommended, just in a bullet to add to the experience and qualifications, experience serving individuals with mental health, trauma, and or substance abuse. Is that?
I think we should put substance use, not.
Substance use disorder? Substance use disorder? We don't use substance abuse anymore.
Oh, well then. Learning every day. Substance use now. Thank you. Melvin?
Yeah, this has all been great. I agree with all of it. I think the thing maybe I'll be that person that's like, we probably have to stop at some point, only because this is going to be too long of a job description. And also it may have a limiting factor that we're not taking into account. There's like two places where you put this information. The first is the fields through which you're looking for people to recruit people, and then the requirement of having the knowledge. And the way we're talking about it is a requirement to have the knowledge is a limiting factor. So I may have experience in something else. And also I wondered if some of this stuff are the things that we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because it's part of like that interview process where we're testing people to see like, where's your competency culturally, where's your competency dealing with the folks struggling with substance use or mental health, whatever it may be. So just offer that as like a flag for it's like 8:13 and we're running out of time. And also let's not overly limit this so that like no one in the state applies.
Thank you, Melvin. Cindy, I do want to give you the opportunity to complete your comment, and then we will move to a motion.
Oh, thank you so much. I know I'm a pain in the ass about this issue, but recently it worked for me. Person first language is person first. So you wouldn't put incarcerated person, you would put a person who is incarcerated or who was incarcerated. And I think I just hold to these standards because we're going to help everybody if we do. Recently, I submitted a bill to the LCO through a legislator, and I put a note and I said, I know this isn't the language, but this is my language and it dignifies people, and they respected it. And that's the only way we're going to get real change. It's important. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. All right, are we prepared to entertain a motion? I'm looking for a motion to accept the job description as drafted with the recommendations for revision that we created on tonight.
So move.
Thank you, Melvin. Having a motion, looking for a second.
I will second that.
Thank you, Ben. At this point, are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, you can say aye, raise a hand, raise the virtual hand.
Aye.
Need to see some sign
Aye.
of agreement.
Aye.
All right. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you all. We got a job description. Look at that. Wonderful. All right, Ty. So next steps, who is this going to? Who's putting these final finishing touches on? Ty?
Well, I can do that based on, I have my notes, and Linda, I know you took some, so we'll make sure we're on the same page. We'll recirculate to everybody, with the expectation, hopefully, that it's consistent with what everybody's expecting, because we will make the changes that we discussed. And then I believe it goes to the, General Administration Office or something like that. And so that's where we'll fill in the missing gaps that would go to the sort of process, if there's, requirements for the posting to be out there for a certain amount of time, and also what we can do with the salary in terms of being more specific about it. And then we'll, once we have approval, I don't know how long, honestly, that part takes. So, some of our timeline might be adjusted based on when we have an approved job posting. But it's my hope, I think everybody's hope, that we can move as quickly as possible to get someone in this position.
Awesome. Thank you.
Melinda, can I just say something if you're getting ready to close?
Nope, I was just moving to the last bit of public comment, and then we're going to talk about our next meeting time and close. So good, you're right on time.
I'm just saying, as I hear everything that's going on around the job description and all that stuff, at the bottom line for me is a quote that someone made. I forgot even who made it, but it's real for me. You cannot serve a people that you don't love. You just can't. And so at the end of the day, that's what it's about for me. If you don't love the people, you're not going to serve them. So that's it.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there any other comments from our general public? Okay. I know Kirsten would have to let them in or something, so sounds like there's none. Any other comments from our committee members? All right. Now,
You might be about to say this, and just in case, I'll mention it. So for scheduling, are you going to get to that? Okay, yeah.
So I was going to say, Ty and I got into trouble with a couple of people around this scheduling thing, so you all have to help us out. One thing I noticed on the doodle poll that we've been using to create our time is it doesn't give you that space to say these are my definite times versus these are the times that I would prefer, but I really still have some other time that I can offer. So I'm proposing that we use a different mechanism, possibly using an actual doodle poll, so you can indicate your absolute cannot times, your yes I can times, and your I could if I needed to times. The other thing that I noticed in the polling option that we were utilizing, that it did not have an early morning slot. And I know that some people aren't a fan of that, but there might be a few of us or more of us or most of us that are actually willing to do an 8 a.m. Before work hours, well, for some people before work hours meeting versus a late evening meeting. So I wanted to be able to have those additional options. But what we're going to survey next is hopefully for the last week of April, because by then we should have gotten the job description back, got it circulated to you all, and have a decent idea of where this is going to be posted and where we can move from there and how our timeline is moving. Is that when we send out that doodle poll, please indicate when you are available, when you are not available, and when you could be available, but you really don't prefer it. Because there's a lot of us, there's a total of 11 of us, and we're trying to make this work for all of us. And I understand that can be constricting. Ty, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, well said. Yeah, we want to find as much common availability as we can. So if you can help us out, that's great.
Awesome. Any other sayings? All right, progress was made tonight. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Good.
Seconded.
Seconded, thank you.
Good night, everyone. Great.